we'll start off first with just a clip talking about the non-farm payroll. We won't go through the whole thing, but I thought it was interesting. I always find it interesting when they have a government official who comes and talks about the data. That doesn't usually mean good things are happening. That usually means someone has some explaining to do. So let's take a look.
Let's continue the discussion now, because joining us is Acting Labor Secretary Julie Su, joining from Washington. Secretary, great to speak with you again today. I want to talk about the response rate. We were just having that conversation with Mike McKee. So just how low was the response rate, of course, in the wake of Hurricanes Helene and Milton? And when would you expect it to pick back up?
Yeah, so the overall picture of this economy remains one of strong, steady, stable growth. We have seen positive job growth every single month under this administration. And as you noted, there were a couple of big factors that make this last month an anomaly. There were the devastating hurricanes, which meant that there were jobs that people, businesses that were closed. We saw this because the federal government was on the ground working with state and local officials to do everything from the search and rescue to reopening roads to making sure people had access to water and to power. And so those same businesses that might have ramped up in the last month on hiring were not doing so. At the same time, the other big indicators are still really stable. Unemployment rate remains at 4.1%. We've said this again and again, that most predictors were that number could not go down to that for many, many years after the pandemic, and it's been steadily at near or below 4% for a very long time. GDP growth is up too. Wages continue to be up. Wages have outpaced inflation for 17 months straight, and so there are a couple factors that certainly we expected that they would affect the numbers for last month's report.
Well, Secretary, if we look at what wasn't as impacted by some of these effects that we're talking about on the weather, I mean, we still had big downward revisions to the September and August payrolls report. Obviously, this is going to be a bit of a noisy report. And looking ahead, I mean, you take a look to October or what we're going to get the next time around. How big would we expect those revisions to be?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we don't have to hear what the government officials could say about the revisions. It'll be normal and healthy and make sense. But let me just paint the picture here, because these are... Oh, sorry, you're muted?
My bad. I do want to say that, though. I do want to chime into the fact that this is a substantially lower report than I think was anticipated. I would expect a revision of some kind, but what are your thoughts? I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, so the issue here is that... So she makes the claim, look, we had hurricanes and we had issues, and that's why the numbers were down. We couldn't actually speak to the people in order to get the numbers that we were expecting. This is a significant miss if that's the case. And also, it doesn't portend, it's not like the phone lines were down. These people aren't working. The businesses aren't hiring. So they talk about this like, oh, it was just a glitch. It was an anomaly, and later on we won't have that problem. No, but you have the problem right now that those people aren't working and those businesses aren't hiring. And so it's sort of like the reason why the numbers are lower don't mitigate anything here. There's a problem. Something drastic happened, but there's a problem. It's sort of like, oh, it's a forest fire in a state, and that's why everybody was out of work, so that the numbers were lower. Okay, so the people are out of work. That's what the number is measuring. The other part of it is that the host says August and September, the numbers were revised down 112,000, right? 112,000. Like the miss that we had, I think, today was between 140-something thousand and 12,000.
That's
right. By the amount that that we missed now, they're saying that the numbers were revised from last time, which
Correct.
means that if we get a revision for these numbers now, we're going to be negative.
No,
potentially
we'd get an upside revision. We would see a larger number of non-farm payrolls revised in the next report, right? As an update to this report.
Well, no, because the numbers were lower. The numbers that were reported in August and September should have been lower. When they revised it, the numbers actually went down by 112,000.
Okay.
They overestimated. And so if we're doing that again now, if we're overdoing it and we're saying it's 12,000, then we're actually negative. if it goes that way. Sometimes it gets revised the other way around.
Potentially. I think here's what bothers me is that, and she made this point in the report there as well, the unemployment rate remained stable at 4.1%. Wouldn't we expect, if non-farm payrolls are this much lower than the forecast of 113,000, that unemployment rate would tick up with that?
Except that what we're seeing is that they're not making any differentiation with the unemployment for number of hours worked per person, number of jobs held. And so if someone goes and from one job, one full-time job to 3 part-time jobs, well, that significantly changes the numbers. Even though the unemployment rate might be lower, the economy is still showing unhealthiness. That someone needs to have 3 jobs in order to do what they were doing for one. And so number of hours worked is one thing. Actually, there's a bunch of these sub-metrics that are looking not so good. Like the number of jobs that are done by undocumented workers. Well, those are skewing the numbers as well. The number of people who are out of a job and then stop looking for a job, I forget what the number is. I think it's after a year or 2 years, something like that. They're no longer counted in the unemployment rate. Whereas if you count the unemployment rate the way it was counted 15 years ago, we might be at 20% unemployment rate. Because as soon as someone drops out of the market and they're no longer looking, they go, okay, you're no longer in that number. So these things are sort of like, well, here's my caveat. It doesn't really matter for someone who wants to make money in markets, right? The markets don't really care about how right someone might be about the underlying dynamics of the economy, unless that's the bet you're placing. If that's the bet you're placing somehow, then fine. But if that's not the bet you're placing, what we're actually trading is monetary and fiscal policy. That's what we're trading. The amount of liquidity within the system, how much credit is available to different entities, what are the sovereign bond flows throughout the world. Like, this is what we're actually trading. And so, if someone has to work 3 jobs instead of 1, I could understand how, at the end of the day, that might not move the S&P. But what I found funny here was the people, I don't know if you were watching a bunch of the headlines in the news going around, people don't know what to make of what's going on in the economy. Goals up, but inflation is supposed to be, worries are up, yields are moving counter to what the Fed is guiding. Bitcoin is up, but the dollar is up. Like, it's this weird thing of, hey, oil is back down. Even though people are like, what is happening here? Are we in a recession? Are we headed to a recession, or is it soft landing, or we're on the heels of a boom? 2 days ago, or a few days ago, we're talking about all-time highs for the stock market and Bitcoin kissing, like getting to whisper to all-time highs. And now we're back to like, hey, the non-farm payroll numbers are bad. It's like no one can make heads or tails as to what's going on.
Well, welcome to the world of uncertainty.
Yeah. The last point I want to make on that is the October was the weakest month for job growth since December 2020. I thought it was pretty interesting. I mean, I always find it a little bit like clickbaity when they go, this is the first month since whatever, because, how do you make a trade on that? But 2020, middle of the pandemic, and to have a weak jobs number like that when we're expecting to be headed to a soft landing and maybe even a pickup, that to me makes me concerned. And I think I'm reading maybe a little bit more into it because Bitcoin didn't break to the all-time high and soar to 90,000 like I hoped it was doing. It pulled back right now. I'm looking for boogeymans in the numbers to be like, hey, maybe I could buy Bitcoin back at 40,000 again. So we'll see.
That'll be a hell of a pullback if that's what happens.
Well, didn't John have an order at? He wasn't expecting to get that order filled at 69,000, right?
Oh, you said 40,000.
Yeah, no, I'm saying 40,000 because
Yeah.
I mean, I'm at $0. I'm ready for anything.
You'll buy it on the way down.
Exactly. I'm just filled with regret when the number goes up, the Bitcoin goes up, because I never have enough of it.
And filled with joy on the way down, huh?
Filled with joy on the way down, exactly. Yeah. All right. So we'll see what the numbers show for the next few months, but it'll be interesting to see what the revisions are on this.